If Marshall can wear his bathrobe to church, you can clap, so it's okay. Welcome. Merry Christmas. It is nice to have you here. As we prepare for worship, I'm going to invite you just to take a moment, close your eyes, take a deep breath. Let that breath out. Take a moment to think about the week. Think about all the things that have happened this past week and hold those thoughts in your hands. Once again, take that deep breath. Let that breath out. Open your hands and give all of those things to God. As we prepare to worship this morning, let go of the week. Turn your focus to God. Please join me in our call to worship. Merry Christmas. With joy in our hearts, let us worship God. I invite you to stand if you'd like as we sing our first hymn that's actually printed.
Which is Angels We Have Heard on High, because the one that was in the PowerPoint was a completely different one. So we just changed it. It's in your bulletin, it's in your blue hymnal. You should have one in the back of the pew, and it is number 23.
Follow what she said. Let's stand and sing. So all through Advent, we have a tradition of lighting our Advent candles. A candle of hope and peace, joy and love, and then the Christ candle in the center. And we lit those again last night, and we're going to light them again today, and we're going to keep them lit through Epiphany. But it occurred to me earlier this Advent season. Sometimes we ask for volunteers to light candles, and we get more than we could ever use, and other times people say, "Oh, it's not my thing," and then sometimes, luckily, your family shows up and you put them all to work and make them light candles. But then it always seems that you hear afterwards, someone said, oh man, if someone had just asked me, I'd have lit a candle. I would love to light a candle, but nobody asked me. So I have 5 candles up here that need to be lit. Is there anyone who would like to come forward and help me light these candles? I'll take $5. I'm also open right here. I almost said it. That's like my family. You break that stuff. You need to blow it out. But I would never chastise my family for not lighting the candle correctly when I didn't light this one. There's a wise man I'll probably come to light it. So the first one we light is a purple candle. It doesn't matter which one, and that is the candle of hope. And the next candle we light is also a purple candle, and that is the candle of peace. Now here's the tricky one. It's the pink candle. It's the candle of joy, and that's what throws everybody off every year. People that do joy, they're not sure if they should light a purple one or a pink one. The next candle is a purple candle. It's the candle of love. And then, of course, the one in the middle is the Christ candle. And you just blow it out. Oh, no, see, you're not supposed to do that. When you see now, I'm gonna give just a second for a teaching moment here. When you have a hot wax wick and a little tube of brass, and I'll just give it to me. There, you You just want to blow it out like that, because when you pull it into the little tube of brass, what happens? The wax cools, and then the next person the next day is, but maybe it's still, oh look, it's still wet. There you go. We did it.
It's okay, Bob. You did it.
I kept the whole place from burning down. That's all right. Scotch, that's what it is.
So the candles are lit. The candles are lit. And that's, again, an opportunity to just look at the light. We think of hope, and peace, joy, and love, and of course the Christ candle, who is the light in the world. And these are the things I hope that we're thinking about on this Christmas day. Join me in prayer. God of hope, you have come to save us, love us, and reclaim us. You have come not as a judge, but as a Savior, not in power, but as a servant. God of peace, forgive us when we think too highly of ourselves, when we fight for power and turn our backs on your children. God of joy, open our eyes to the beauty that surrounds us. Open our hearts to the gift of love that is offered this Christmas. God of love, Child of Bethlehem, be born in us today. We will join the angels in singing your praise this Christmas day and all the days to come. Amen. This morning I'll be reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was the life, and in the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And I just thought, after yesterday, for those of you who were worshiping with us last night, I should have just handed the Bible to Kyle and let him read, because you got a lot of accolades. So thank you for being a part, all of you for being a part of worship. So this is a time today. We knew that Christmas morning, some folks would make it, other folks wouldn't be able to. We didn't know if there would be 2 or 20, and we were past that. I knew for a fact that Kate and I would be here together, but I'm excited to see all of you who came here to worship Christmas morning. Our hope was that folks would like to share some stories. I always have 1 or 2, but you don't always want to hear mine all the time. And intermixed with those stories, then we're going to make requests for the hymns and the carols that maybe didn't get sung through Advent, and then Kate will let us know if that works. So first, I'd like to make an invitation, and these stories can be Christmas memories. They can be something that happened just now, something that inspires you you've been inspired by the lights. All stories, in my opinion, are holy, and all stories should be shared. So if anyone would like to share a story, you can come up here, or we can get the microphone to you. Shirley, did you want to come up here? Okay.
I would like to tell you how I spent my first 5 Christmases, the first 5 years of my life. I was born in Friesland. You better have a little background first. I was born in Friesland, a province of the Netherlands. This country is sometimes called Holland, in 1934. Friesland is the most agricultural of all the provinces. Lots of cows, sheep, goats, chickens, and horses to work the land. Whatever land is not in permanent pasture is used for growing crops to feed the animals. There's 1 city in the province and several small towns. I spoke Fries and had not been exposed to any other language. My father was a veteran in the American Army, World War I, so he spoke English. This is what my parents were told when they were children, and this is what they passed on to me. I hope this does not offend anyone here. Things have changed a great deal, and it's a much different story now. I would like to introduce Sint Claus, om sin hinder my Zwarte Piet. That is Santa Claus on his horse with Black Pete. The ritual was, Mother wrote a letter to Santa Claus telling him that I had been a good girl and maybe mentioning something I had done that was helpful, and asking for what I would like to have Santa bring me. The letter was pinned to my stocking, and the stocking was left on the table. Next was to get some hay for Santa Claus's horse. This was put out into the klompen, those are wooden shoes, that sat outside by the back door. Now it was time to think about whether I would get something or not. But there was one problem. You see, Zwarte Piet was also with Santa Claus. And even though Santa Claus brought his things in a big bag, Zwarte Piet had a bag too. And if you were naughty, he picked you up and took you away, and you never came home. In the morning, I woke up with great joy. I was in my bed, in my room. First thing was to go downstairs and see if the stocking had something in it. The stocking was not on the table, but that was okay, because Santa Claus always hid it. Next, a quick trip outside to see if the horse had eaten his hay. The klompen were empty, so everything was in order. Now I could look for my stocking, but not inside it, because there might be candy in there, and we had not had breakfast yet. So get dressed, wait for Father to finish feeding the chickens, eat breakfast, clean the kitchen, and then open the stocking and the present that Santa Claus brought. All this happened on the 5th of December. That was Santa Claus's celebration day, and that was when the children got presents. On December 25th, we celebrated the birth of Christ in Bethlehem, went to church, and got together with the family. Either they came to us or we came to them. There was a Christmas tree, and best of all, treats from the bakery, marzipan, speculoos, trymonen, Jan Hagel cookies, and chocolate. And if you were lucky, your cousins came and brought their toys and books, and it was a wonderful day. Now I would like to tell you about my first and last visit with Swatopete. We arrived at Hoboken, New Jersey in May of 1940 on an Italian liner. I was 5 years old. We took a train to Grand Central Station, New York City. After several hours of waiting, we took another train that went from New York to Los Angeles, California. My father had 3 brothers who had a dairy in LA County between Torrance and Redondo Beach, and that was our final destination. We boarded the train and got settled in. I thought the sound of the clickety-clack of the wheels was really neat. After a while, we had dinner, and later it was time to go to bed. My mother and baby sister, who was very sick, had the lower berth, and Father and I had the upper. There was a small light in there, and then the black curtains were closed. The light was turned off, and we went to sleep. During the night, I needed to use the toilet and woke my father. He turned on the light and pressed a button, and he told me someone would come and take me to the toilet and bring me back. Well, the black curtains opened, and I saw him, Swatopete. And what I really saw was the white of his eyes, but I knew I was in big trouble. It wasn't near Christmas, but I'd done some things that ordinarily, if we were home, would have had received punishment. So I knew I was in for it. The day of reckoning had arrived. I started crying and saying, no, I wouldn't go with him. It was bad enough to be taken, but to go voluntarily is not to be done. Finally, I said, well, no, I really didn't need to go at all. Of course, my father could realize that he was going to have a wet bed shortly. The sleeping car people were not happy with me either. I woke the baby up and most everybody else. But finally, my father put his foot down in no uncertain terms, and I went with the porter. I thought about what my dad had said, and I decided that Swatopete didn't want to have a wet bag either, so I was okay until I actually got there. And when I did, and that door closed, I wasn't coming out of that little room. No way was I coming out of there. Then, of course, the porter's job was to get me back to my father. And he had such a soothing voice, a beautiful southern accent, which if you've ever had the opportunity to hear that authentically, it's a wonderful sound and very soothing. And even though I couldn't understand a word he said, he couldn't understand a word I said. He kept talking to me, and he got me out of there and back to bed. The next day, the night porter came to my father and said, "Why is that little kid so afraid of me?" Well, my father told him the story about Santa Claus and Swatopete, and the porter thought it was terrible to tell a story like that to a child. My father was not real thrilled with having to repeat this either. In defense of my parents, I will have to say that at that time and in the country, the chance of my seeing a black man while I was still young enough to believe in this story were just not to be had. It just wasn't going to happen. But there we were. Lost my place. The father asked the porter then if he could bring me a coloring book and some colors. And he did. My father said yes, and he did. And that was great. And after a while, he asked my father if he could give me a tour of the train. Well, my father was great for this because my mother was tied up with a sick baby, and I was my father's responsibility and hampering his conversation with everybody. So it's fine with him if I had a babysitter. He was very conscientious with me, the porter. Always made sure that I was back in my compartment if the train stopped, because it did periodically. He was just very good to me. It began a real friendship. It took 4 days to cross from New York to Los Angeles. And he was the night porter, so the time that he spent with me was really his time off and time to rest. My mother wasn't real pleased with this arrangement, but she had a sick baby, 11 months old, and that was how it was. One time he showed me how how to care for the birth, what the employees actually did in those trains. And he took me around, and I watched them put the white tablecloths on the table, and the little lamps and fresh flowers on each one. And it was just a real interesting day. Then in time, he took me to the kitchen, and there a cook was making cookies. And he asked the cook if I could have a cookie. And the cook was another colored man, but he was of a different stripe. He figured that my porter was wasting his time on this obnoxious kid who prattled on and didn't even understand the porter, so he was not happy about it. But my porter stuck to his guns and then mentioned that I had a little sister, so I should have 2 cookies. And that was great, 2 cookies. Obviously, a little baby doesn't eat a cookie, so I had another one. It's all right. Eventually, we came close to LA, and we had to pack up and get ready to leave the train. And I did that. We were standing there, and I realized that the porter wasn't with us. And I said to my dad, he should come home with us. He was the first friend I had. In fact, he, of all the people I had run across in this trip, he was the first person who really befriended me. So my dad said, no, he couldn't come home with us because he had to stay on the train. Well, I started crying, and he came over to see now why I was crying. Well, my dad told him I wanted him to come home with us. But he explained that he couldn't, and my father translated this. When I was a little older, I realized how kind and patient the porter was to a little Dutch girl he would never see again. He did accomplish his work. I learned early, the color of a person's skin doesn't matter, but what's in their heart does.
Shirley told some of us that story a week or so back. And then I asked her, well, actually I begged her if she was going to be in church this morning to share, and she said yes. And I just think, thank you. That is a powerful, powerful story. And if some of you are thinking, I have a story to share, but it's not that long, or it's not that in-depth, or it doesn't have, that's okay. A story is a story. So it's kind of how sometimes I feel after the choir does an amazing anthem, and then I get up and preach, and I'm wondering if my preaching stood up. It does. It's good. All stories are good. So if you have another story, if anyone does, I invite you to think about that. We're going to sing. We're going to sing something here. Does anyone have a request? We're going to play Stump the Music. No.
Number 46, on this day earth shall break. Uh-oh.
Nature's way.
You're welcome to stand.
Thank
beautiful hymn. I'm going to also make a note, because now, Kate, we can add to all, yeah?
Absolutely. As long as you sing it, we'll do it.
But don't go too far, because if no one has a story right now, we're going to jump to another hymn. So. Well, does anyone have it? You're welcome to sit if you'd like. We'll do a lot of that today. Sit down, stand up. Does anyone have a story they would like to? Is that Ariana?
Number 41.
Oh, you have a request. Okay. I thought it was a story. I'm sorry. I was going to make you come up and just tell a story.
Did you say 41? Yeah. Okay.
And before you start, since this could be a day of stories and songs and stories and songs, I'm just going to give you the blanket. If you want to stand up and sing, you're welcome to stand up and sing. If you want to stay seated and sing, that's fine too. Instead of me saying get up, get down, get up, get down every time we do a new hymn. So, Kate, let us sing.
Oopsie. Oh, what key am I in? Okay.
I can never tell if people are waving or making a
So,
part.
I have a story.
You have a story? Please join us.
If y'all haven't already figured out yet, I'm extremely Scottish. Okay, I was telling a gentleman last night after the service that I've probably worn out my 10th kilt by now. Growing up in a Scottish household, Christmas was your holy day. That was church. That was what you did. You went to church. There was a perfunctory presence and all that. You did that stuff just because you had to. But the biggest thing was the week leading up to New Year's and what we called Hogmanay. Hogmanay was a whole bunch of food, a whole lot of stuff that I wasn't allowed to drink, and a whole lot of music going on. And it was always the blast. That was what being Scottish and Northern Irish was about. And it was basically, if you were English, you weren't allowed in. When I was a wee boy, my brother was taken in a violent act. And I left my mother in a really sad state. I was born in October, so my second Christmas was very, subdued because of that, because he died on October 1st. So for Christmas, it was a very staid thing. We didn't do anything. And my aunt thought that was the most horrible thing in the world. This boy should have a Christmas and a Hogmanay like none other. So next year we're going to do it right. And I remember going out to her house, and we'd party all night, and you'd wake up at dark 100, and you'd follow the bagpiper out to the bluffs and look over the ocean, freezing your tuchus off, watching the water come in and wondering why you're out there when everybody else is asleep. That was what we did, but they decided they were going to do it one better. My aunt was a person, have you ever heard of the Irish Rovers or the Clancy brothers? The Irish Rovers started here in America, so they were indebted to her. They were really good friends of hers. So I remember a lot of parties where we'd learn Irish music with the Irish Rovers. So it was kind of cool. She had a friend that offered a cabin up in the Sierra foothills at the snow line. It was pretty cold. And I was told that it was my day. We're going to have this party for me. Okay, I'm 3 years old. That I guess means something. But I scooted out of the car, ran across the icy ground, and I slipped on the ice, and I smacked my head smack dab on the concrete porch. Split it wide open and spent my night in the hospital, in a little tiny little Sierra Nevada hospital in blizzard conditions, mad as all get out that I wasn't getting all those sweets and all the stuff that I was supposed to be getting. They wanted to come on over and visit me. So here come a lot of the guests from this hogmanay over to the hospital to visit me, and they weren't allowed in. And there was a big ruckus outside. There was a police officer guarding my room. Nobody was allowed over because I was inside the room. My parents weren't allowed in, okay, because the police officer said no. Unbeknownst to my family, I'm Robert Irvin. They knew that. But unbeknownst to them, Irvin Roberts had decided he wanted a little extra Christmas cash, and he robbed the local mini mart or something. And in Sierra Nevada fashion, he was pummeled by the person and taken to the hospital to get his right eye stitched up, same as I'm there to get my right eye stitched up. So there's Irvin Robert getting a right eye stitched up, and there's Robert Irvin getting a right eye stitched up. Irvin Robert warranted a police officer. Robert Irvin got the police officer. So I wasn't allowed out of this room. Nobody's allowed into this room. And you can't tell a Scot, especially a Scot after they've been drinking holy water all night, you can't tell a Scot they can't go do something. It just doesn't work. So I remember hearing, this is one of my earliest memories at 3, I was doing pretty good, but I remember doctors and nurses telling everybody to pipe down as the bagpipes were raking in the hallway. And they were cranking up, and here's the Irish Rovers singing carols and bagpipes going on, and somebody brought in a wee bottle and they're passing it around, and they gave it to one of the doctors, and he said, I shouldn't do this because I'm going to give your son stitches. But anyway, that was one of my earliest memories, but I do remember trying to get out of there. We had a hard time because the paperwork is already there. Irvin Roberts is supposed to go home with his parents and enjoy a Scottish holiday, while Robert Irvin is supposed to go spend his time in the San Andreas County Jail at 3 years old. When I went on later on in life and I was going through my background checks to get into the military and all that, I found out that I couldn't go because I had a warrant out for my arrest for robbing a liquor store in 1971 when I was that big, when I had my criminal history started. But that was my first Christmas memory, and that's, to me, I'm kind of glad I haven't shared that one with my kids. I mean, at least they know it, but I haven't shared that kind of story with them yet. But there's mine.
So, of course, I'm wondering, did Irvin Roberts escape because there was no one guarding his room? I mean, they had you locked down, but was he able to sneak out a window and go off? See, the questions that come in your mind. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone else want to share, or should we sing some more? Okay. Do we have any more requests? Eric?
I think we have a Holy in the Ivy.
Oh, okay. What is that?
I don't think it's in.
A Holly and the Ivy?
I don't think it's in any of the books that we have. Oh,
Can we fake it? Oh.
we'll just take it. Let's just do it. Let's just do it.
And then, hey, Kate, before you start, what did you want to suggest as well? Okay, so let's do Holly and the Ivy, and then let's do Joy to the World.
Okay.
And then I'll sit down and stuff.
Okay. Is that the one?
Joy to the world, but before.
I don't think I've done this one.
Jeremiah was
Any other suggestions? Yes.
29.
29?
I'm just sticking with two.
Oh, that's good.
Know how a rose.
We do Low
It's in here.
Yeah. What number that is? I just saw that. 48, yes.
wasn't really planning to tell a story, but I've been thinking about my brothers, who I don't get to see very often. My brother Tom lives in Goldendale, Washington, and right now he's in Arizona with his son and his son's wife, who are expecting their first baby. And my other brother, Jim, is in New London, Connecticut, in the midst of a storm, with his wife and her many grandchildren. But I was thinking about them when they were young and trying to remember all the stories, but I was 3 and 4 years older than they were. And the stories I remember are really because someone else told them so many times. And the one about my brother Tom, who was the older boy, was about him being so curious about Santa Claus and trying to figure out where Santa Claus came from. And we did have a fireplace. And of course, on Christmas Eve, you do not light the fireplace. And there is a photo of him as a 3-year-old, I think, no, must have been 5-year-old. There's a photo of him bending way over inside the fireplace. It was a pretty big fireplace. And he's inside the fireplace looking up, but the story, the funny part of the story is that he has a hole in his pants. And that poor boy, that picture got pulled out every year from forever. And I do wonder now that his memory is failing. I think I've told about him before that he had some brain injuries due to motorcycle accidents, but I wonder if he remembers, and I need to ask him that, or maybe I shouldn't. And my other brother, Jim, whose birthday is December 22nd, was always getting very excited for his birthday, and my mom did a good job of keeping Christmas in our house quiet until after Jim's birthday. And we would have a birthday party and cake and ice cream. And when that was all done, then the Christmas decorations finally came out and we could trim the tree. And every year, Jim watched us trim the tree, sick on the couch. He just got so excited for both his birthday and Christmas that he just couldn't join us. And so I always remember Jim on the couch. And I was wondering if last night Jim was on the couch.
I always wanted to do that. So a lot of Christmas, the greatest stories, especially like Bob's and the kindness of the porter on the train, it's that the giving of the kindness and the giving, even when people don't even know that you're giving something. And there's another side of Christmas that I love to think about, and that is when you're a child. It's that surprise of getting something that you had no idea was coming to you. And that it was a gift that's, had a mystery about it and that you just weren't expecting. And there's something, and I'm going to tell a little bit of a story about that aspect of Christmas that most of us remember when we were kids. And so in my life, I call it a Christmas moment when something happens unexpectedly wonderful. It's like, wow, that's just like Christmas. And so when I first moved down here from Portland, I found in a little antique store a wonderful it was a knife. It was a knife probably made in India. It had a horse head, a brass horse head on the top, and a big handle and a long shank, and it was perfect for my hay shed, for cutting the strings on the hay bales. And so I got that knife partly because it had a horse on it. Well, a couple of years after I built my little hay shed and was using my knife, I lost it. Because I didn't have any way to keep it. It was just supposed to stay in the hay shed. But it went around the farm with me. And I lost it and I never found it. So at least a year later, I was moving some things up near the barn and pulled up a roll of wire, and there was my knife. It was Christmas. I started crying. I never expected to see it again, and there it was. So I have one more little short one. That's not it. That was the prelude. So a few years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I was running out of chickens that needed. Our chickens were old, so I decided to get some baby chickens. And so in the spring, it's kind of an Easter story, really. In the spring, I went and got my little chickens from the Grange. You know, you take them home in the box, and they're just little days old. And they need heat, and so they were in their box. There were maybe 8 of them. And I put them in their box, in the bathtub, with the heat lamp, over the top. And your daughter really needs to be here listening to this one. And they were happy, you know. They had their little, I mean, they were so tiny. I just had a little tiny jar of water and a little tiny jar of feed, and they were pretty happy. And they do their peeping thing. And because the heat lamp, which is a red one, they kind of stay awake at night, so they peep. And so yeah. So because of their peeping, I had slept in a different room that wasn't attached to this bathroom where they were. They were in the bathtub. And I woke up with a headache for some reason at 5 in the morning. It was dark. And I realized it was very quiet. And I got up and I flipped on the hall light, and there was no light. So we had lost power overnight while I was sleeping. And there was no sound from the chickens. And I went back, got a flashlight, and they were in a heap, all on top of each other, wet from falling into the water, and only a couple of them were moving. So I thought, okay, I have no power, I have no way to heat these up. The fireplace wasn't going because it was spring. So I thought, I can get in my car, and I can see if I can warm these guys up, because I could see a few of them were still kind of moving. So I took the box into my car, and it's a Prius, so it took a long time to warm up. It just doesn't have a lot of heat coming out of the engine. And I sat in the car with the heat blasting after it got going, and I held each chicken up to the heater. 1 by 1, 2 by 2. And gradually, they started to come around. And see, it's a resurrection story. And by the end of an hour of holding these chickens up to the heater, and we still had no power in the house, I had 8 little chickens that looked like they might survive. A couple of them were on the border. And the wonderful thing, and the reason this is a Christmas moment, is because I went to the Grange and I told them what happened. They said, "Oh, take a couple more chickens just in case." You know, so they sent me home with two more little baby chickens. But the miracle, the Christmas miracle, is that all 8 of those chickens survived and went on to lay eggs for me.
So I'm looking at, I'm looking at the clock, and I was going to see if they had 1 or 2 more.
After that story, let's see number 24, away in a manger.
Tell you what, hold that thought, yes. I'm going to take us to the next little part with the socks, because I want to be good about the time. And could we end with Away in a Manger? Would that be okay? All right. If you were just getting up the nerve to tell a story, then I invite you to share those stories when we leave this building and this room of the building out there for coffee and some wonderful refreshments that were provided. And I encourage you to tell those stories. And if you're not sure you have one to tell, then I'm going to ask you to think about this one. When you were a child, if you feel comfortable sharing, share one gift that you remember that was amazing, and one gift you wondered why Santa Claus ever would have put it under the tree. Maybe it was the least favorite gift you ever received as a child, so keep that in mind. Was doing a little bit of research as we move towards the socks here, and I just couldn't pass up, the birthday hat. It happened. So I think, Kate, we will have to sing Happy Birthday to Jesus in a little bit here when we do the sock piece. But so Christians have been doing this Christmas thing for over 1,800 years or more. I don't know if you knew that it was somewhere in the early 3rd century that the 25th of December was designated as Christmas. There's more information on that than anybody wants to hear me talk about from the pulpit on a Sunday morning, but there's a lot of interesting background to why that was chosen and some of the things about that. But what I did find interesting, very interesting, was even before that date of being decided on the 25th, the early church fathers, and they were fathers, the early church fathers were very opposed to celebrating Christmas. The birth of Christ was acknowledged, but there was no Christmas celebrating. It wasn't, birthday parties were not, that was pagan. We didn't do that. Other people do that, but we didn't. So even into the 4th century, when people started thinking about celebrating Christmas like a birthday, there was a lot of pushback from the church leaders at the time. You go to the Puritans in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, they actually, from 1659 to 1681, passed an anti-celebration Christmas laws for 22 years. If you were found on Christmas Day to be not going to work or feasting or anything else that was suspiciously like celebrating, you were fined what would today be about a $50 fine for celebrating Christmas. And it occurred to me, oftentimes today we hear folks, saying that there's a war on Christmas and that, that there are non-Christians out there that are trying to keep us from celebrating Christmas. And it seems like the only people that have been keeping us from celebrating Christmas are Christians themselves, or at least passing laws. And I say that somewhat facetiously but seriously. No one can stop us from celebrating Christmas. No one can. And if you get overwhelmed by the TV and the shopping malls, find a way to let that go. Or if someone says Merry Christmas and they find that offensive that you said it, be kind to them, understand where they're coming from, but Merry Christmas to you is Merry Christmas. So no one can stop you from doing that in your heart and in your mind. And the reason we did the socks, just kind of for fun, was that gift giving really comes back to, I think we know this, but I'll say it anyways, to the gift of the child. That's why we give gifts as Christians. That's why we give gifts. And I think the piece I want you to take away from here today, as well as a new pair of socks, is that you, every last one of you, you are a gift. You are a gift. And you are a gift to the people around you. You are a gift to this congregation. You are a gift to your family. And if anyone ever tells you that you're not, don't listen to them. You are a gift. And I invite you to share that gift of yourself with the people you know, maybe strangers, maybe family, whoever that is. So as you come forward in just a moment, and maybe Kate, what you do is we'll sing Happy Birthday to Jesus and I'll let you come forward. If you have brought a pair of socks and put them on the table, I invite you to come up and take a different pair of socks to take home with you. If you didn't bring a pair of socks and you thought, oh, wow, there's at least 6 or 7 extra pair of socks up there. I threw a few more on. So if you want a pair of socks, I want you to come up and get a pair of socks. So as we sing Happy Birthday to Jesus, you may come up as you feel led and take a pair of socks and then just go back and sit down. To pick them up and feel them and see if they feel soft enough for you or if they're big enough for you. I don't want anybody with a size 13 going home with a size 6. So. And also, just if you didn't notice it, when you come up to get the socks, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it, Shirley can correct me later, there's a pair of wooden shoes filled with hay up there on the table, just as a nod, because I knew someone was going to tell a beautiful story today. There are still socks up there. Did your sister send you up, Ainsley, for socks? No? Okay. I thought you were running errands there.
She's in one for sister and for mom.
That's important. Oh, forgot mom. Forgot sister. Okay. Well, then take them and reform them and redeem them. Well, I'll go to the giving away. So yeah, I got the Nightmare Before Christmas socks. Please join me in our Christmas prayer that was written long ago by Robert Louis Stevenson. Loving Father, help us remember the birth of Jesus, that we may share in the song of the angels, the gladness of the shepherds, and the worship of the wise men. Close the doors. Let kindness come with every gift and good desires with every greeting. Deliver us from evil. May the Christmas morning make us happy to be thy children, and the Christmas evening bring us to our beds with grateful thoughts, forgiving and forgiven for Jesus' sake. Amen. What was the number again that we're? Number 24. I invite you to stand as we sing our last hymn. Before we go out into the world, there are still more socks up here. And those are gifts, and those poor socks, if they're sitting all alone in this sanctuary with the lights off, as we all go home to celebrate, it's going to tear my heart apart. So if you did not grab a pair of socks, or you need to grab a second pair of socks, let's make sure those socks all find a good home. You can even regift them. Give them to someone who's coming by the house today. But please, please take a pair of socks. And after you have your socks, stick around and join us for a time of refreshment and a time to share some more stories and to wish each other a Merry Christmas. And now may the love of God the Creator, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen. Merry Christmas.